Good morning, Priya. How are you?
Very well. How are you doing, Sanam?
Very well. Very well.
Let me just try and get back to our WhatsApp. We're not visible to the panelists, right? It's just the three of us.
No, no, you're visible to everybody right now.
Everyone.
Hi there, Swati.
Yeah, how are you?
Very well. Trying to remember it's a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Ready to go? We're at 11 now.
Yes.
Yes, let's start, Priya.
Snigdha,
Uh,
we're all right?
yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Snigdha and I'm part of the Thai Bangalore team. Good morning and welcome to today's session. We're expecting a few more people to join as we speak. Um, as you may know, this is part three of a five-part series, Recasting the Business Paradigm by Bloom Ventures and Thai Bangalore. In the first session, we covered work from home and communication culture. In the second part yesterday, we had a very interactive session on HR and legal. In today's session, Harnessing the Power of Teams, we're exploring layoffs and acquihiring. Today's session is moderated by Priya Chetty Rajgopal. She's a board member at Thai Bangalore and founder and managing partner at Multiversal. Priya, request you to please take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Snigdha. Thank you all. Everyone, welcome to the session. I know this is an absolutely crazy time, but I'm delighted that Thai has taken the time, the effort to set up a whole series in terms of addressing some of our very, very valid concerns. So, welcome to Sanam, Swati, and Mitul for this session, and thank you so much for taking time to address a set of, I think, very important and interesting thoughts and worries that we have. Mithul, you've just gone off. Just
Sorry. Got it.
so just to set the context, Snigdha was kind enough to give to introduce all of us. But you know, we all know that organizations like TIE have a very strong role right now in addressing and reaching out to entrepreneurs who are going through a very rough time. I'm one myself, and I know that all of us are worried and concerned about what the future holds. Um, to say that this is a tough time, to say this is a difficult economic time, is probably one of the largest understatements that we've had. Because personally, professionally, economically, we're going through the most bizarre, surreal moments in our perhaps a lifetime. And yet, like everything, challenge and adversity brings out the best in us. And I really hope that through these interactions, we're able to sort of look at what we need to do better. Are you able to hear? Just are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can, Priya.
Oh, good. No, the screen just. So at this particular time where we're struggling, we have to look at three different perspectives to this. One is what I've already mentioned, where and there has to be an upside, a moving forward from this difficult time that we're going through. The second thing is to be able to understand that as India, as a South Asian country, we are in a unique place, primarily determined by the fact that we have a unique social background, unique cultural issues. I don't think that we are in that position where we can take layoffs as something which is like par for the course. We are concerned. It affects us personally, it affects our psyche, it affects who we are as people, it affects our identity. So it's an important thing to hold on to while we are navigating this very, very, um, I wouldn't say brave new world, but definitely a scary new world. So, what I would like to do, and with your permission, going forward, Sanam, Swati, and Mitul, is to have you share a little bit of your perspectives. And, though the focus that we have at this point is harnessing the power of teams, looking at layoffs, acquihiring. This is the broad purview that we have. But let me just sort of um, start you off with a question that is of interest to me. Please do quickly introduce yourself after you answer, while you answer. But my question is, let's start with understanding how are we going to manage the next stage, possible layoffs. What is it that we need to do to manage the emotional aspects, look at it positively, and still follow our dreams? I would really be interested to have your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Just quickly to
Sanam, you're not audible.
um, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Priya. Welcome, everybody. We are going to be discussing some very interesting aspects today about the things that Priya has, pretty much covered. Quickly to introduce, I am Sanam Raval, the lead talent advisor at Fashion Connect and Bloom Ventures. Um, well, I am of the opinion that things are, the most difficult that they are today. Of course, no one has been trained to manage a time like this. And I understand that, we never thought this was coming. But, the discussion today, that I want to share my views on is, primarily in the assumption that everybody today has pretty much done everything they had to in terms of, trying to survive in this time, and but eventually are forced to be involved into particular layoffs. So we're going to try and help you think a little bit about how can you go through this time from a more of an emotional point of view. And please note that all the things we're going to be discussing today is purely based on your current timing of being involved in a layoff. If you are not involved in a layoff, it's not that you should be taking the pointers that we are sort of talking about. This is just purely for those who are likely to be struggling and don't know how to go about it. Quickly to sort of start off with this entire bit, Priya, like you said, the emotional aspects, right? I mean, I was looking at the news, and I was looking at the current situation, and well, I mean, everybody, doctors struggling today when thousands of people are being tested positive against coronavirus, and it's a difficult choice, right? Whom to prioritize on the ventilators, whom to be involved in, because it's so limited. So who do you go for? Do you go for the older person, or do you go for a younger person? It's a very difficult choice. I think that founders, leaders, managers are pretty much in a similar situation, right? How do you go about a layoff? Who should you be choosing? Who should you not be choosing? Are you in a scenario where you obviously don't know what to do? So my thinking around this comes on a few points that I think that managers and leaders should be are thinking a little bit about the cost benefit analysis, right? Yeah, these people that you are working with, that you have hired, they might have contributed to shooting up the numbers for you in your business. But is there a potential to weigh to take their weight on right now? Go back to the time when you sort of thought about building this entire larger dream for yourself, right? Go back to the dream, and think a little bit about, if you have a team of 100 people and you're laying off the five, what about the people, the 95 that you're giving a home to? These people, I mean, think about it from a positive point of view, right? There are some things that have to be done, and to be able to have those things for you to do, you should be thinking about the larger dream, right? I mean, what exactly are you going? People are in much worse condition, right? When you're talking about a pay cut, for example, but people are losing jobs. They are being involved into much more larger, difficult choices. But at the end of the day, it is a survival choice that you have to take, and if that survival choice means that you have to in the interest of the company, in the interest of the dream, in the interest of the survival, if you have to let go of some of these things, then you should be thinking at more unconventional and non-obvious options to potentially a layoff scenario. The question is largely going to come around how should you be talking about this. my opinion in this scenario should be, honest. You should be very honest. Honesty is the best way that you're going to be able to, put your entire bit ahead. It's your own decision, right? If you are a hiring manager, do not frame it on your founder. Do not blame it on your company. Own your decision. Talk about the times. Talk about why you are doing this. Be impersonal. If you have the financial bandwidth, be generous with the separation package. But think of it more from a point of view that you are, everybody today is understanding the situation. So if you are being able to, sort of explain to them in a manner that, these are things that you got to do to survive. I think these decisions, can be made, sort of explained in a very, very straightforward manner. I mean, quite honestly, such decisions are, result of external factors, and companies can't get away with it. Acting confidently is really going to help you sort of, be involved in this situation. um, Another thing that, I particularly want to, sort of highlight is largely over the future and fairness part of it, right? It's a state of panic, so you don't want to go overboard and, knock off slabs of the pyramid, right? Have a strategic sort of understanding of, how your organization's pyramid. You have the lower level, you have the mid and senior level, and then you have the most senior level. Try and safeguard, the larger interests of the lower level, because they are the ones who are, least, largely the least paid ones. But these are the people that you should, try and cover up a little bit, in terms of, how to ensure that they are being, they are managing this situation in a much more better manner. I think such things, would largely be able to help you go through this decision better.
I need to sort of jump in at that point. You mentioned 2 points. One is the desire to be honest, and I think it's an important quality to be able to drive us through this time. But as importantly, you put a perspective which, once again, in the Indian context, is hard for us to understand, which is, if you are having to let go 5 people, but you're
Correct.
reaching 95,
Correct.
now we all know the power of numbers, and you're doing the best you can, because it's better than 100 people, losing their jobs because the company's lost its way or has no bearings, has no anchor to arrange for, either salary cuts or lose some people, which helps you keep the company going. From a perspective here, it's very hard. We've been through many layoffs or many economic downturns, but it has always been global, which has permeated down to us. We haven't had something which has affected us as much as anywhere else in the world. It's not a filter effect. If you have to give one suggestion,
Correct.
and we have a presentation that we can quickly go through, but if you had to give one suggestion on that, on how to handle this aspect of saying, yes, we have to keep the larger interests, but we are going to lose a few people, what would you say?
Honestly, I think, Priya, you have to, sort of potentially, go back to the strategy that you have had so far. Let's, assume that you have hired thoughtfully, and if you've built your teams, thoughtfully, not gone overboard with salaries, for example, I think you're in a safe place. It's not gonna affect you, largely that much. The worst you're possibly going to be involved in is going to be pay cuts and not layoffs, which is where, you go back to the, the suggestions that I've given, where, you can talk to them and tell them a little bit more on the lines of, okay, it's just a pay cut. We can be involved into some potential strategies of, increasing your pay in the, like, longer time of the year, etc., and things like that. But let's say, for example, on the other hand, you are in a situation where, you have made some bad hires, and you are aware that, for the next 1 year, these hires, now, you don't really call it bad hires, right? You somewhere identify the deadwood sort of a scenario, where these people might not be in the place to be able to add in the, the kind of value that you're looking at in the coming year. This probably would be a good time to let go of them. So, I mean, probably a strategy that can be adopted in this scenario on how to do it, should be, depending on the cost, benefit analysis, like I said before, on the high contribution and the high cost scenario, right? You have people who are higher in cost, but, higher in high, in contribution and value. But then you have people who, probably would be the other side, where they might be higher in cost but low contribution. probably the best time for you to try and cover up that scenario. Maybe this ideology might end up working for them largely. I think the outlook amongst young workforce needs to change in this particular scenario. Value for skills needs to be over value for money, because at the end of the day it is for survival. Everything I'm sort of talking is more aligned towards the startups. I think MNCs are in a better place to be able to survive this in a manner. But the value for skill needs to be over value for money, because the external environment is impacting everyone. And I think people, managers need to step up to be able to cover that.
Got it. So we are already at 20 minutes. I'd like very much to, have you, I know we have a presentation, so I'd like to finish this part and then go into the next question, which I hope to ask you, which is on alternative and innovative methods that we can look at to handle this. And so would you like to go with the quickly the presentation that we have?
Sure. Yeah. We can yeah, go ahead with that. Yeah.
While you roll that out, let me just share, because I'm glad that we have so many participants. I see 100 people online, 105 actually. So welcome everyone, and thanks so much for the interest. What we will do is we will take questions as and when it comes up, if it's of a particular interest to the presentation. And we would like very much for the last 20 minutes to be reserved only for questions and answers. So is that okay with the panelists and participants? I hope that is okay with you.
Sure.
Works. Sure.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go with the PPT and let's keep it interactive and focused. So we're at the 20 minutes, the time slot right now. So let's go. Are you rolling the PPT?
Yes, I am. Just a minute.
Sure. I can see some questions that are already coming in, which is of interest. I can see Abraham.
I'm just sharing my screen, so everybody is able to look into it. Awesome. Priya, if you sort of potentially want to move on to the innovative hiring styles.
No, I think you've talked about strategizing. So just quickly, we can go through the implementation.
Okay, sure.
The questions around innovation, because I think we have no choice but to respond innovatively or out of the box. We just have no choice.
Correct.
We've shown leadership in many, many different ways worldwide. And I think this is just one more time for us to be able to do this again here. We will be okay. I am so confident that we will be okay.
I agree, completely. I pretty much took through the similar things that we are, potentially discussing right now. But, for everybody who's listening, implementing these layoffs, protecting the bigger picture while being, fair to all the employees, protecting the lower brackets, pretty much, sort of potentially covers it. Deciding between, layoffs, universal or staggered pay cuts, arrears in pay cuts, balancing the financial viability. I think these things pretty much, sort of cover our, larger part of, everything that's been discussed. Largely to, potentially think about other ways. Let's say, for example, founders have been able to be involved into layoffs, everything they've done to be able to, survive, but now, have reached the stage where they have not been able to survive, right? So we're going a little step ahead and, thinking about the future. What do you do then? That's when, I think, there are potential unique approaches to traditional strategies that, Passion Connect has possibly thought about, which I think, Priya, with your, with your advice, I'll go ahead and let Swati discuss a little bit about this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Swati. If you could just, thanks so much for being here. And, we've had a great chat yesterday. This is an unusual space and innovative to say the least. This is startup capital, India, the world, whatever. And we love our entrepreneurs. We love the phenomenal stories that have come out of the city. And perhaps the talent and the ideas and the products that have come out have been so phenomenal. Sometimes some of these may not see the light of day. But you're talking about something that there's a possibility of if I can be so bold as to use the word, possibly a win-win, even out of this. So go for it, Swati. Love to hear that.
Thank you so much, Priya. I'm, happy to be part of the webinar series, and probably with, some ideas that we share here, it could be useful to, a few of them, and they could probably come out, I would say, with a much lower damage in the current scenario. Just to give you a background, I have been part of, hiring for startups for the last 7 years, and I very recently joined the Bloom family as part of the Passion Connect team, where I'm leading the Acquihiring vertical. Just to give you a background on, before I dwell into strategies, just to give you a background on Passion Connect, it's primarily the recruitment arm for our founders across the Bloom portfolio of 110 companies. So we as a company, as a team, we really relate to entrepreneurs, and we understand the grueling effort that they go to in terms of, getting together their team. Because it's really important for any entrepreneur that any person they are getting on board, they share the same passion that they do for building up products or services, for a long lasting business sustainability. And they are here to understand that, they are creating products that will solve real world problems with the help of technology. And we are trying to leverage on the fact that where employers and employees share the same passion, they create history. And I think that's what we are trying to speak on today's webinar, that we are trying to harness the power of teams. So during this entire process, while you're building up your team, I think the biggest asset that you have right now while you're building up your organization, the biggest asset that you have is in the form of your teams. Like Sanam said, that we're in a very difficult time. It's a very unprecedented situation, specifically for us as a country, because like you said, that all the low downs in economies that we have seen are primarily on the global level. India as a country has not been, on the forefront of being affected by it as the major country. But right now, I think all of us are being affected, where along with having to think of layoffs or, pay cuts, specifically in the startup industry, many of us are actually struggling with the financial availability of running down the business. We are probably at the juncture of thinking, whether or not we can continue or not. So I think one of the survival strategies that we have actually thought that we think then can probably help a lot of founders in this case is acquihiring or strategic partnership. So acquihiring is a very, very simple way of saying that, you will be acquired by another company primarily because of the team that you have and not because of the business or products. So, it's about understanding that, the team that you have created here can actually become your biggest asset in a current situation. None of us is, alien to the concept of acquihiring. We've all heard, read, seen various companies successfully go through it. What we are trying to say here is that, it's not the only survival strategy, but if as a founder, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you feel that, you are at a juncture wherein you are not able to get a favorable exit, or, you think that you are probably out of your runway or will be out of your runway, this is probably an alternate route that you should think of for the growth of the larger ecosystem. So, there are obviously some inherent benefits that we feel that acquihiring will offer in such a scenario. I think the first and foremost, which I think all of us are focusing on, is that as a company, you still gain entry into the market. Your sustainability is still continued from a long-term perspective. So that is something that that you need to focus on. The team, the biggest asset that you've built during the course of building your organization, are still working together. They can still be part of the larger scenario. They're still working together, and they are still generating fresh ideas. They're still working on products, and also now working on more innovative ideas in the business scenario. One of which, what I feel in the current scenario, wherein, you are actually creating an environment of ambiguity or uncertainty, you have to think about layoffs and pay cuts. With the thought of acquihiring, I think you've changed the mode, the environment here. You have turned it into a positive environment wherein you're telling your employees that, there's something positive that you have in mind. You are thinking about the larger growth of not only from an organization perspective, but also from an individual perspective. You're ensuring that, when you told them you are taking care of them as employees, you are ensuring that you're gaining their trust as an employer here, as a leader here, and ensuring them that you have a planned future, or probably you see a better future for them in the larger aspect here. Also from a company that is acquihiring in this case, will also have a certain advantage, specifically in the current scenario that we are in. We are all working from home. We are all remotely working in the current scenario. Specifically, when we are hiring people one on one, we spend a lot of time in terms of integrating them and training them. And I think while we are working remotely, I think it becomes a challenge to kind of do that right now. So if you pick up a team, that is already integrated well, that understands the, some nitty-gritties of the business, we feel that you will spend less time in terms of integrating them, training them, and, maybe they'll probably be on work on day zero in few of these cases as well. But it's really important, whenever you are considering acquihiring or strategic partnership, you're very clear with the conversation, to have a successful collaboration. As a leader, I think we've all been saying this during the webinars, that communication is the key to success for any successful collaboration or any successful implementation of idea that you have. So over here, your employees know that what is it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. You're back. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was saying that it is very important that as employees, as leaders, as founders, you let your employees know that what you are thinking, because it for you, for them, code is very, very important for you to have a successful collaboration. You should see it like a strategic partnership, like a collaboration, which will gain a long-term perspective, business sustainability, and the teams will still be working together. So it's more about understanding that you have to be proactive in situations like this, and you should actually harness the power of your teams in situation where you feel that you are probably out of your runway, and you're not able to probably survive because of the financial non-availability. Of course, while you are considering acquihiring, there are major factors that needs to be considered, and I think we'll be taking them during the course of our presentation. Acquihiring should not be confused with acquisition, which has a lot of financial aspects that come into play. So I think we'll be discussing on, and we'll be touching on the financial factors as well that you need to consider while you are considering acquihiring or strategic partnerships in this case.
Super. Swati, thank you. It's an unusual subject. Even I'm having some issues in terms of digesting, the concept and how it actually, works out, gets implemented, and of course the true entrepreneurial spirit of wanting to continue the idea but still wanting to make sure that you're in charge. So we'll come to that. I'm sure there'll be enough questions about that a little later. We will get on to financial factors, but I found there were so many questions around the financial aspects already. My thought was perhaps we could just, Mitul, with your permission, we'll go back onto the presentation, but I'd like to just address a few questions along with.
Sure, that's fine, Priya.
So along with the topic, which is the financial aspects of factors in acquihiring. So some of them are related, they're general, but I would still like to leave this before we start on the financial aspects. What are the, when you're looking at pay cuts, this is to all of you, what are the parameters, asks Vishwak, considered for pay cut, and what percentage of pay cuts is advisable?
I'll take this up. So I think practically the parameters, I mean, of course, there's no sort of right answer here, but the advice remains that, like I said, you need to sort of jot down the pyramid of the hierarchy that you have in the team. Ideally, it is being said that the least amount of pay cuts should be involved into the last, the last level of the hierarchy. Priya, I can't hear you, sorry.
I said you mentioned that.
Correct. And then, if the percentage can be involved into, if we are talking about the highest number of percentage for the founders and the core teams to be, sort of potentially taking that, along with the middle ones to be, more on the lines of, at least, taking an example, people who are taking the most amount of hits, like, around a 50%, 60% hit at the top level, and then the middle level goes anything beyond a, a 30, 40, and then the last one is, somewhere around a 15 or a 20, or, try, and if you can't do that, but, relatively it goes around these percentages.
Got it. You mentioned that, and thank you so much for that insight, because this is something we all worry about. A question on, from the acquihiring perspective, and perhaps Swati and Mitul, you could look at that. Matthews asks that if in acquihiring, can part of the team be hived off to the acquirer with an assured return on the compensation that is taken on? Thoughts?
So I just some thoughts. I have some part covered in the slides, but I think opportune time to take it off right now. So yes, definitely part of the team can, as long as there is no conflict of any sorts, because an acquiring company cannot be doing the same thing that the company being acquihired is doing. So as long as there's a fine line between that, considerations, yes, you can manage. There are different kinds. It could be upfront, it could be a deferred milestone link, and consideration, could be time linked. So there are various scenarios on that, but yes, you can manage these small acquihires as well within the teams.
Is there a parameter for that? Are there benchmarks that you follow?
So it's when we talk about it to companies or investors like Bloom specifically, we talk a lot about this to Ashish because of the kind of portfolio they have. If you're getting a good people and you're getting good products, you should find a way to make it work. So parameters then is just basically figuring out that what sort of runway are you losing out? Is it changing you as a company altogether? Or is this something which would be an added advantage if this sort of team comes in? So we've seen various small verticals start through acquihires. We've seen CXO level employees come through acquihires. Now typically these are not very easy, right? And in an acquihire scenario, we're looking at a win-win of sorts. So in that, these become the considerations, and then of course commerce has to play its part. Tax, structuring, if minds meet, products meet, but commerce doesn't meet, it doesn't go through. So of course that will definitely play a critical part as well.
Thank you, Mitul. Not related, but still on the financial issue. Would you position, ask Abraham Matthews, would you position stock options as an alternative compensation to payouts in cash, and experiences that you have on that space?
So stock options are very highly used in acquihires for the simple reason that in any acquihire, you will never expect outcomes immediately. They will always come in over a period of time. Like you would want any other employee to earn out their compensation, it is very common for usage of stock options. Cash rich companies who don't want overcrowding on their cap table, so if let's say a Zomato is acquiring, or an Ola is acquiring, and it's a small 5 million 10 million sort of acquisition, they may just choose to pay it off in cash and not get anyone on the cap table. But if you have Series A, B sort of funded companies where expectation is that these small units or the acquihire group will run a certain part of business which will grow over a period of 2 years, 3 years, then it's best to use it's a mixture. So there could be a little bit of upfront, there could be monthly payouts in form of salaries, and then of course stock options to end with, which can be milestone and time linked, so that it serves the purpose of both sides, and it's a win-win.
Thank you, Mitul. I'm going to let you, go into the presentation on the financial factors, Mitul.
Sure.
A question that perhaps looked at by all the panelists here, which is from Harish Nair, and Harish asks if anyone has information on what the government initiatives are for MSMEs to sail through this crisis, whether there's fiscal stimuli or any other packages in place. I know I read about a couple of them, but for smaller companies and for MSMEs, are there any thoughts that you have on what is already being planned?
So no major packages yet. There are very small benefits that are coming out. So for example, deferment of ability to pay tax like GST and TDS at lowered interest rates. There is SIDBI has come out with a small debt equivalent limit that they can give, provided some companies meet certain conditions. So there are these small benefits, but I don't think they're too material to change the life of MSMEs or startups at this point in time. We're hoping that something does come out for sure, but nothing as yet.
Thank you. So Mitul, I'm going to, we're at the 38, 39-minute slot right now. So we have a reasonable amount of time to answer questions a little later as well. But may I ask you just to go through the financial factors in this acquihiring?
Sure. So just quickly, the first one we partly started, so I'll just complete it. Typically, you would have when an acquirer is looking at a company, they would look at the founders to continue running the company, or not if not the company, at least the vertical that they're acquiring for. KMPs are likely to be a part of that group as well, and compensation, like I said, could be a mixture of cash, stock, both, and it is generally done that way. There could be differential compensations, for founders. Founders may have to vest over a period of, let's say, 4 years or 5 years. KMPs may be a little shorter. So there are different kind of scenarios that may come up. So one would have to be, ready for that. Barring that, I think the second point which I've put is the due diligence. So, for any acqui-hire, there are 4 or 5 key items that any acquirer looks at, and it's best that those 4 or 5 things are clear between both parties. So, for example, outstanding liabilities, these play a very key role in determining the final valuations that acqui-hires happen at. Because see, in current circumstances, right, the first thing that everyone is talking about is, let's say, deferment of expenses, or not pay loans at the moment, or salary cuts and maybe pay them later. So these sort of liabilities eventually have some impact on the acquisition valuation, because any acquirer would then have to take on those liabilities as well, if commercially agreed. So it is best that that gets discussed at the time initially, and so that it's not a surprise later on. Two, like I mentioned, some acqui-hires are also for certain products, certain teams, and an ongoing business as well, right? So acqui-hires may not be the best option for founders or investors of a company that is getting acquired, but there could be prospects, there could be enough potential for the company to do well if they get a good home. And when you get a good home, the expectation is that you will continue to grow your business. Of course, we will provide all our network. We will provide whatever financial help we have to, all the best practice as an acquirer. But the acquirer would expect that the company grow and reach a certain scale. So that is the second factor that one must be wary of. Third, litigations typically. There could be 2 kind of diligences that happen on companies that are being acqui-hired. It could be a very extensive one, or sometimes you do a very short abridged version of a diligence and focus on the key items. So litigation typically tends to figure on both. No company wants to acquire products or any companies which has ongoing litigation issues. Could be around IP, could be around their product, could be around the founders, KMP. So just need to be ensuring that those sort of areas are kind of clear. So that's the second point. The third point, there are different scenarios in which an acqui-hire can happen. You could have a scenario where an acquiring company takes over the entire company that they want to acquire and makes it a wholly owned subsidiary and runs it entirely and controls it. That could be one. The second one could be an acquirer takes on a majority stake in the company and does not give stock of the holding company to the employees, but the target company can continue running and building on its own. So if I would just put names as an example, let's say a Flipkart and a PhonePe. PhonePe is continuing on its own and thriving, as a business. So that's not an acqui-hire, of course, but just to give a relatable example, that could be a scenario. Then there is a third one where larger companies say that we don't want anything to do with the company or any of its constituents. What we want is the team. So team simply moves out from that entity, resigns, and comes over to ours, and we compensate them the way we would to any of our other employees. So that could be the third scenario that one could see. Of course, there are various factors that determine and change each of these, but broadly, these are the few things that should kind of come up on time. What we've seen is the reason acquisitions or acquihires fall through is because some of these structures are not thought through. And when when you're agreeing upon something commercially, but then when you actually see the tax impact or the kind of cash outflow that people are looking at, it becomes a little bit of a problem. Where companies getting acquihired have investors liquidation preference clauses typically get triggered because valuations are not too high. So these are few factors that have to be brought in time, not the first discussion or the second one probably, but definitely the third or fourth should factor for all of this if you want an acquihire to go through successfully.
Thank you, Mithul. On this subject, I mean, since you have brought up, issues around diligence and several, that's a great set of inputs. Um, in this particular time, especially when we start getting back to, our new normal, time is of the essence. Now, there is a certain aspect of how long this takes. As an acquirer, you have to be very conscious of a few things. You have to make sure you do the right thing. But there is an element of very great shortage of time because
Yeah.
employees are bleeding, the company is bleeding, etc. So, what are your comments on that? And a very related question is on the ethics of it. There is a certain sense of while you harness adversity and make the best of it, benefit everybody, there's also a very important thing of not being a Shylock and taking more than one pound of flesh.
Yeah.
Because it's a very double-edged sword in time. So these two questions, one is, the timeliness of how long does it take? Does one have any shortcuts at this particular time? Second, the ethical aspect.
So see, if you're, it depends on what sort of acquirer you are. Where acquirers have stakeholders that they have to fall back on, or they are, let's say, a listed entity, for example. There are various obligations that they have. Now, while yes, time is a constraint, there can be ways and means where you can try and optimize on both, ensuring that you achieve the commercial objective and yet do it within time. It may mean doing a few things differently. So, for example, let's say a whole acquisition, making a company a wholly owned subsidiary may not work. Then, because that needs a certain level of diligence, which naturally involves time. So, in that scenario, you can just look at the people, look at the product, and kind of move on. Take that and move on, and that'll be very quick. But the thing is, entirely depends on the acquirer. You could have a Series A, B company who may not be too worried about those sort of things and simply say that, okay, fine, let's just move on and get this going. So it varies. I mean, yes, but I would definitely say that people are conscious, and one key thing is ethics. You mentioned very important. I would urge that be clear absolutely on everything, because in these times, over communication, like everyone has been saying in the last 2 weeks, is the best solution, right? When you're not face to face and doing a lot of things over video, over communicate and ensure that everything is absolutely clear, so that there are no hurdles when you actually get to execution.
I completely agree to that point. Just to quickly add, I'm of the opinion that the more open the communication is, and the more you share your struggles and everything that you're going through as a leader and a manager to your people. I know over throughout the sessions, all the sessions we've had, we've been stressing on this topic, but I cannot stress enough. Talk to them like you're talking to someone, close to you. You're working with them every day. You spend more time with them than you spend, probably before the lockdown, probably even with your family. Tell them everything you're going through, and I think they are more likely to understand the decisions that you're taking, instead of you beating around the bush, or instead of you sort of potentially telling them or blaming it on everything else. The more open the conversation, I think the more likely are they going to respect you for potentially taking these decisions.
Sanam, that you mentioned this before, and I think the point that you're raising about honesty is something
Yeah.
that very relevant today. We've all got this. We've come from a very, when I say paternal, I don't mean from a gender point of view, but your family, we look after you. We come
Sure.
from that space. So to admit, to be honest, sometimes is also to admit weakness, and that doesn't come easily to us. So I get where you're coming from, because this is actually a bit of a mental shift that gets harder and harder for us to do,
True.
we feel we're conceding defeat. I'm talking to a lot of people who are so uncomfortable, but most of them are saying, we'll get through this. But when I'm asking questions like, so how do you plan to do it?
Correct.
And time frame you're looking at, where do you think? Obviously, it's dynamic. We all can't predict. But it's a lot of, no, we'll figure it out. And
Correct.
I really admire that spirit because that's what really makes an entrepreneur. But where you cross the Rubicon in terms of protecting your idea, your spirit of the company, and protecting the team that you work with becomes, I think, the very subtle balancing point.
Yeah.
At the end of this, I think we are all going to learn not just how to do business, uh, but how to be, in some ways, better people and perhaps more focused on outcomes which are for the larger good rather than for ourselves.
Right.
And I don't know what
Definitely.
that
So,
Gandhi.
what I feel, Priya, here is that as an entrepreneur, like you said, and even as a nation, we are very emotionally driven. So whatever idea that you have, you have emotionally nurtured the business, and you've taken it to a level where it is right now. And to actually decide that whether you are at that juncture of probably passing on the idea, the baton to somebody else, is something may not come very comfortably to you. So I think it's important that first you deep dive as an individual, that what is more important. You want to look at the practical aspect of it, or the emotional aspect of it. So when you start considering the practical aspect, that as a leader you can still be there, like like Mithul said, in most cases, whenever the acquihiring or acquisition is done, the founder is generally taken on as the business leader for the business that they are hiring. So then you have to understand that you're still leading that business from a larger perspective, because I think all of us as entrepreneurs are trying to build up the new age technology, the digital ecosystem here, and we should actually try striving it for it together. So it's important that you weigh what is more important to you from an emotional aspect and from a practical aspect, and then take a decision. Because I think we are all emotional in the current scenario. We are all having a very difficult time dealing with it professionally and personally. So it's important that we do some proactive thinking here. We deep dive and understand that for the longer run, where you see yourself thriving, where you see your team thriving, what's the practical decision to make here, and then go on to decide that, okay, yes, this is probably that I should be looking at, whether it's looking at an acquihiring option, or whether it's laying off people, or whether it's pay cut. You should always be looking at the long term goal, because ultimately it's important to understand that there has to be a business, there has to be a team for the growth. If none of it exists, the business as it is shut down. So the emotional aspect that you're weighing on is no longer valid.
Yeah, and like just to quickly add to this, I'm also of the opinion that when you're thinking about going through this conversation, the person, the employee should be also thinking a little bit, putting themselves in the managers, leaders, founders shoes as well, right? You need to think about the time that they've put into hiring the team, the amount they have done to make you grow as a as an individual. I mean, your career is in your leader, founder, manager's hands. So it's not like they have not put in the effort and the time in you. They've hired you, they spent a lot of time interviewing you, they spent taking your career into their hands. But I mean, unfortunately, it's a survival strategy. The people who are surviving on the ventilator, I mean, I keep connecting to this point because it's so relevant. I think you need to sort of accept it, that it is a difficult time for everybody. And if you are in a situation that you are being laid off, or your salary is being pay cut, think of it as supporting the person you have been working with, and sort of being there for them as well, because they are also in a decision of not thinking about a career for one person, but it's multiple people. I think such kind of thinking can also create a community sort of understanding. And when things get fine, you can always think about coming back. And I think everybody will be open to that. I think it's a way of thinking as well.
all different ways of thinking about this. We have, and thank you for that, Sanam. We have another 7 minutes left. I'm going to take two quick questions, if I may. One was which came in, which I thought also was interesting, and I want to put two questions together. What are the typical costs and payouts involved in the acquihiring transaction? That is between a giving founder and a buyer.
So, Mithil, you would want to take this,
Yeah.
or?
So just from our experience, what we've typically seen is that companies getting acqui-hired are in a slightly tough position. They are not in a position to command valuation that they would ideally want, let's say if they're going out for an investment. So with that in mind, a correct balance that ensures that the founders and the key employees are motivated enough. That's one. And two, as a company getting acqui-hired, if you have investors on board, ensuring that at the minimum, they get capital, preferably a small return as well, but at the minimum capital for sure. A combination of these two is what we've seen generally work. And it is important to ensure that, as an acquiring company, founders and key employees are, compensated enough to keep them motivated for the next 4 or 5 years, because you're banking on them. So these two things have to be kept in mind. There is no common number. I mean, I can't say $1 million or $2 million. It doesn't work that way. It would vary depending on what kind of company it is, what scale it is at. We've seen various kinds, especially geo acquisitions that we've seen off late. All of these are acqui-hires in some sense, right? Where they're expanding their geo platform. So it would vary from company to company, but these are the broad, factors that go into consideration.
Related to that was a question again from Abraham Matthews on what is the time frame for the acquihire to exit and roughly the expected IRR, and how would they be positioned in relation to the existing investors? If you can share your thoughts, but with a quick example. I'm conscious that we have only about less than 5 minutes to
Sure.
close. So just a quick one on this. Just give it with an example, because right now, I mean, obviously you can't give names, but I'm just saying help us understand that.
Sure. So let me put in a few stakeholders involved. So let's say I am company A. We have two founder companies. We're a 50-member team, and we have three institutional investors and two angel investors. A complete combination of sorts. Each of the investors have a liquidation preference clause. I am not in a position to raise money like I would want to, and I have two choices: either shut down or find a new home. In that scenario, if I am getting an acquisition offer that helps me continue building what I want to, and that kind of becomes an advantage for the company that is acquiring me, then what I would want to, kind of ensure is that um, uh, my team is taken care of, because that's what most of the founders want. That uh, that is the top priority. After that, they would definitely want that investors kind of get taken care of as well. We've not seen too many scenarios where a founder would say that to an investor that don't trigger the liquidation preference clause, because what that essentially means is that most of the consideration would go to the investors and founders are not left with too much. But surprisingly so, what we've also seen is a lot of investors are saying that, okay, fine, we'll not trigger it. Let us just get our cost back, and you can go and find a new home and continue building this. So that, I think that's the emotional aspect that we have in this country that comes into picture at those sort of times. It's not there always, but it is there at times for sure. And in terms of IRR, see, you cannot really put an IRR number. It's like I talked about the first answer. It's various factors that go in. At times, you get an acquirer that just wants to bulldoze and take it through. And then, what choice do you have as an investor, right? You either lose your entire capital or just go in with what you're being offered, because that's the best you can get at this point in time. So you can't really command IRRs at that point in time, because there are chances that you may not be on front foot, not back foot, of course, but you're standing where you are. So you don't have too much negotiating power at that point.
Got it. There are a couple of more questions which I've just put on live, which is some of it may not be visible here, which is, what can we do in terms of pay cut of salaries and is it legal? It was answered at yesterday's session. Statutory compliances, what next for team members, and sometimes the balance between layoffs for saving money and not about performance issues. That's actually quite an interesting point of view. So your thoughts on the fact that even when you're acquihiring, you might take 20 and you may not take 5. How do you how do
Yes.
you work?
So,
I mean, Swati, go ahead, go ahead.
So, Priya, like you said, actually, it's a difficult scenario for everybody. I think during an acqui-hiring also, one has to understand that whether there is a fitment, because I think it's more from a fitment perspective that you may not be hired, and it's not that you do not have the experience or the technical skills. When specifically if you're getting in an acqui-hiring position, it's important that you understand that you are part of a certain business, and they have a certain plan that they see for that business. So as an individual, if you do not fit in, or if you're not part of the acqui-hiring, then it's primarily because they are not looking at the experience that you have, not that you're not worth of it. So it's not that something that you should be taking more emotionally. It's about understanding that you have to look at the larger picture, and you have to understand that right now for you there is not a fitment specifically from the skill set specification, and nothing to do from the emotional aspect or a personal aspect here.
Thank you. We are pretty much at the end of time. It has been a fascinating session for me, particularly because of the scenario that we find ourselves in. As I said, not unusual, but just sheer cataclysmic. So while this might have been an interesting discussion 6 months ago, today it's a discussion which is of great meaning, great note, and also a viable alternative. And this is all part of perhaps the Thai way of thinking, particularly because of our focus with startups and entrepreneurs, in trying to be innovative and responsive to the needs of entrepreneurs during not just a difficult time, but this particular difficult time. And again, within the broader context of the Indian cultural system and our social structure, which makes a lot more layers and a lot more granularity about what we need to do to respond in the right, ethical, and pragmatic manner. These are things which I think are very, very important. We've talked through the emotional aspect of the situation, the layoffs, options. We've talked about innovation in terms of responding to this, particularly in light of what you have covered, Swati, on acqui-hiring. Mithul has talked about the financial aspects in terms of how does this kind of thing get structured. So we're all a little richer for this information and hopefully a little bit more empowered in terms of moving forward um, with options. The idea is, I think, to leave the session with all our attendees, and thank you so much to all the attendees who have listened in and had some great questions and participated because they care about their company, about their people, on what else, what next, and how. I'd like to end, apart from saying thank you very warmly to Sanam, Swati, and Mithul, and to, of course, Snigdha, who's been managing this, and Vijeta, and to Thai Bangalore, with a very hopeful message that we have always contrived. India has been at the forefront of so much. Bangalore has been an absolutely dazzling center to excellence, to startups. We have been proud again and again of what we have produced, the sustainability we have had, and the sheer chutzpah that we have to be able to get out and do the right thing. Despite dark times and despite the gray clouds, I know we'll see a silver lining. And I know if one cohort of people can take us, catapult us to the next stage in India's economy, it will be and it must be our entrepreneurs. So let's cheer all the wonderful entrepreneurs who are here listening, and to ideas and fantastic suggestions and to new ways of doing business in the times to come. So thank you.
Definitely, Priya. Adding to just one positive point, because I think it's a very interesting one. The Bloom core team has come up with with a fundamental strategy that we really use in our days, which is fit hai to hit hai. And I think, leaving this on this note, mental peace is something that is going to going to work very well in handling such situations, along with physical physical fitness as well. We have all the time in the world today. Please use it. Let's take it a little positively, use it on a note where you become better in various aspects. It's not a competition, but invest a little time on yourself and make yourself manageable enough to be able to handle these situations. We will get through it. We are going to get through it. We are very near. Let's just get at it in a in a manner where everybody comes out of it, and with some kind of learnings, and also some kind of sort of time that you get for yourselves and the families. The entire Passion Connect team and the Constellation Blue team is going to be available on social media. You can just ping us if there are any questions. We are more than happy to answer them. It's a great session,
Thank you.
Priya, and everybody else.
Thank you so much, Priya, for
Thank you all. Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you,
Thanks, Ty. Thanks.
Vijeta, would you like to say a few
Yeah,
words?
sure. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Vijeta here, part of the Thai Bangalore team. Thank you so much, everyone. And Priya, that was a very nice, inspirational talk. And yes, we at Thai will continue doing the very best that we can. It's fantastic to have Bloom Ventures, Constellation Blue, Passion Connect, and all these guys coming in. So thank you so much to the Bloom team. A lot of respect for Sarita, Sanjay Nath, Sada from Constellation Blue, Arpit, who's a fellow volunteer like me at Head Start as well. So just to quickly let all the participants also know, at 3 p.m. we're having this virtual startup showcase coming up on with other accelerators as well, like people from InBev, Lowe's, SocGen Catalyst, and also with the Kimberly Clark. And with Bloom, we're also continuing with a couple of more sessions on Monday and Tuesday. So I think that's fantastic opportunities for interaction, for people to talk, people to get together, and let's stay inspired. And as Priya said, fostering entrepreneurship, helping the startups to go to the next level, help them to get the best possible mentoring, the knowledge, the education, so that they can grow, is what the country needs. And we will do our bit as much as we can. And thank you so much for all the support and help that we're getting from the ecosystem. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vijeta.
Thank you all.
Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye. Take care, guys.
Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye.
Absolutely.